There is a box, small, cardboard, forgotten, at the back of a closet that's almost never opened. Inside it, old photographs, a child's drawing in colored pencil, a birthday card with the shaky handwriting of someone who was still learning to write. To the best mom in the world. The person who kept this box hasn't spoken to their mother in 7 years. There was no event, no final fight, no moment when everything exploded. There was something worse. There was silence. There was distance. There was a decision made slowly, like removing a bandage millimeter by millimeter, knowing it will hurt either way. And there was a question this person still asks themselves every time they accidentally open that closet. What kind of person walks away from their own parents? This video is about people who did something society considers unthinkable. Something that has no name. Something that doesn't come up in family conversations. Something that, when mentioned, makes people change the subject or look at you with silent judgment that hurts more than any words. This video is about those who walked away from their own parents, not out of selfishness, not out of ingratitude, not on a whim, but for survival. And I need you to understand something before we continue. If you've never had to do this video might seem incomprehensible. It might seem exaggerated. It might seem like context is missing. But if you've been on the other side, if you've spent nights awake trying to justify to yourself a decision that felt wrong in every way, even though it was the only option left, then you know that no one cuts ties with their own parents because they want to. You cut ties because staying is destroying you, and that's the part no one sees. There's a psychological phenomenon that has no official name, but that every therapist working with family trauma recognizes. It's the moment when a person realizes, sometimes after decades, that the love they felt for their family wasn't quite love. It was hope. Hope that one day things would be different. Hope that the next phone call wouldn't end in criticism. Hope that the next visit wouldn't reopen wounds. Hope that if they tried harder, worked harder, were more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, maybe finally, they would be seen. But hope has a cost, and the cost is that you keep returning to a place that drains you because you still believe that next time will be different. Next time, they'll understand. Next time, they'll change. Next time, and that next time never comes. But here's the interesting part. The first thing you need to understand about people who walk away from their parents is that they didn't arrive at this decision easily. There's a cultural narrative that says anyone who cuts family ties is cold, selfish, incapable of forgiveness. But the reality is exactly the opposite. People who walk away from their parents are usually people who forgave too much, who tried too much, who came back too much. They're people who gave hundreds of chances before admitting that the 101st wouldn't change anything. I remember someone telling me once, "You only get one family, you have to make it work." And I spent years believing that, years thinking that if I just tried harder, if I just became more patient, more understanding, more forgiving, eventually the relationship would heal. But what I didn't understand then, what took decades to learn, is that some relationships aren't meant to be healed. Some relationships are meant to be survived, and then, finally, left behind. American psychologist Sherry Campbell calls this loyal child syndrome. It's when someone continues trying to have a relationship with people who consistently hurt them, because loyalty was taught as an absolute value. You honor your parents. You don't question. You don't complain. You don't leave. And when the pain becomes unbearable, the person doesn't allow themselves to think, "They're hurting me." They think, "What's wrong with me that I can't handle this?" That's the first imprisonment. Their inability to name what happened isn't weakness. It's the result of a lifetime of being told their perception was wrong. And that inability to name is also a way of surviving in a system that punishes honesty. The second imprisonment is more subtle. It's the impossibility of naming what happened. Because when we talk about abuse, most people imagine something visible, something obvious, something that leaves marks that can be photographed. But there's a form of abuse that doesn't leave bruises, doesn't raise its voice, doesn't break objects, doesn't threaten directly. It operates in silence, in omission, in the look of disapproval, in constant comparison, in the systematic invalidation of everything you feel. Psychology calls this emotional abuse, and the cruelest characteristic of emotional abuse is that it convinces you it's not happening. Because there was no slap, because there was no scream, because they're doing the best they can, because it could be worse, because at least you had food on the table. And so, the victim of emotional abuse spends years, sometimes decades, unable to name their own experience. They know something is wrong, feel it in their body, feel it in the anxiety before each visit, feel it in the inexplicable relief when a meeting is cancelled, but they have no words, and without words, there is no validation, and without validation, there is no permission to protect yourself. There's a psychology behind this that most people never understand. After decades of trying to enjoy family dinners that felt like performances, after years of leaving visits feeling exhausted instead of recharged, these people aren't failing at connection. They're protecting their peace from relationships that were never safe to begin with. Still, here's a curiosity. I want to tell you about a concept that might change how you understand family relationships. Family therapist Murray Bowen developed what he called differentiation of self. It's a person's ability to maintain their own sense of identity, their own values, their own emotions, even when in contact with their family of origin. In healthy families, differentiation happens naturally. Children grow up, develop their own lives, and parents support this process. But in dysfunctional families, differentiation is seen as betrayal. Having a different opinion is disrespect. Setting a boundary is rejection. Seeking emotional independence is abandonment. And the child grows up in a system where the implicit message is, you can be yourself, as long as yourself is exactly what we want you to be. This creates an impossible paradox. Either you sacrifice your identity to keep the peace, or you become who you really are and lose your family in the process. And many people spend their entire lives trying to find a middle ground that doesn't exist. There's a question that haunts those who consider walking away from their parents. But what if I'm exaggerating? This question is not an accident. It was planted. Families that cause harm rarely acknowledge the harm they cause. And more than that, they actively rewrite history. That didn't happen. You're remembering it wrong. You were always too sensitive. This has a name. It's called gaslighting. And when you grow up being systematically taught to doubt your own perception, you lose the ability to trust yourself. So when the pain becomes too great to ignore, your first reaction isn't, they hurt me. Your first reaction is, I must be making this up. And you go back, one more time, to prove to yourself it's not that bad. And when it's bad again, you think maybe next time. And the cycle continues. Until one day, something changes. Here's a secret people rarely say out loud. The moment of rupture is never what outsiders think it is. It's not a dramatic fight. It's not a shocking revelation. It's not a single event that changes everything. It's something much quieter. It's a day like any other. An ordinary phone call. A comment that's been made 1,000 times before. But this time, something inside you can no longer absorb it. It's as if a glass that was full to the brim finally overflowed, not from a great wave, but from one more drop. And you realize, with a clarity that hurts, that it's not this specific moment that's destroying you. It's the accumulation of all the previous moments. It's realizing you spent your entire life trying to be good enough for people who never saw you as enough. It's realizing the love you gave was never returned in the way you needed. It's realizing the hope that kept you there for so long was, in fact, a prison. And in that moment, something happens that psychology calls anticipatory grief. You begin to mourn people who are still alive. If you are someone who's spent decades trying to make a relationship work with parents who never truly saw you, you're not alone in this. This journey of choosing peace over performance is happening quietly, all over the world, right now. After years of trying to fit in, millions of people like you are finally choosing themselves. Before we go deeper into what this means for your life, take a moment to join this quiet corner of the internet, a space for people who've spent decades feeling different and are finally finding their peace. And if this resonates with you, share in the comments what part of this journey touched you most deeply. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. You're not alone in feeling this way. Let's continue, because what comes next might be the very thing you've been carrying in silence for years. Let me shift for a moment and speak directly to you, not about you, to you. This is the grief no one talks about. When someone dies, there's ritual, there's social permission to suffer, there's a funeral, there's embrace, there's a my condolences. But when you walk away from a father or mother who's still breathing, there's none of that. There's only emptiness. And there's the question in people's eyes when you say you no longer speak to your parents. What happened? And you don't know how to answer, because it wasn't one thing. It was 1,000 small things. It was years of things. It was things that would seem small if you told them in isolation, but that together formed a structure of pain so dense you could no longer breathe inside it. And even if you tried to explain, people wouldn't understand. Because culture taught us that parents are sacred, that parental love is unconditional, that family is everything. And if your experience contradicts that narrative, the problem must be you. I spent years thinking I was broken. I'd watch people around me talk about their families with warmth, make plans for holidays, call their parents just to chat, and I'd wonder, why don't I want that? What Carl Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, even when it means separating from the family system that kept you small, isn't a failure. It's a psychological necessity. What if nothing is wrong with you? What if the world needs more people who choose peace over performance? What if walking away wasn't abandonment, but the first act of true self-love you've ever committed? At 50, 60, 70, you've earned the right to choose peace. You've earned the right to protect your sanctuary. You've earned the right to say, I tried, and now I'm done trying. And now it's time to talk directly to you about what comes after. I need to talk about guilt. Because guilt is the invisible chain that keeps people trapped in relationships that destroy them. The guilt of setting boundaries. The guilt of not being grateful enough. The guilt of doing this to them. The guilt of being the child who destroyed the family. This guilt is real. It's heavy. It's constant. But I need to tell you something important about this guilt. It's not yours. The guilt you feel was installed, was taught, was used as a tool of control. In dysfunctional families, guilt is redistributed unfairly. Children carry the emotional responsibility that should belong to parents. It's the child who learns to manage their mother's mood. It's the teenager who learns not to provoke their father's anger. It's the adult who still feels they need to protect the feelings of those who should have protected theirs. And when you decide to stop carrying the weight that was never supposed to be yours, guilt screams. How can you do this after everything they did for you? You'll regret this when they die. But guilt is lying. Because setting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's survival. And protecting yourself isn't selfishness. It's the only way to have something to offer anyone. Maybe you are one of these people. Maybe you've spent decades trying to love people who never learned how to love you back. It doesn't mean you never get lonely. It means you've learned the difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is chosen. Loneliness is not. Solitude is your sanctuary. Loneliness is a prison. And when you're finally in your own company, in the peace of your own home, you can breathe. While others fear missing out, you've discovered the joy of opting out. And there is something important still waiting to be said. There's something few people talk about regarding family estrangement. It's the freedom that comes after, not immediately. At first, there's grief, there's doubt. There are nights when you pick up the phone and almost call. There are holidays that hurt in a different way. But over time, something begins to change. You realize the constant tension that lived in your body has started to diminish. You realize you're no longer waiting for the next conflict. You realize you can spend an entire day without that knot in your stomach that you didn't even know was there because it had been there forever. And you begin to discover who you are when you're not constantly trying to mold yourself to the expectations of people who would never be satisfied. This isn't abandonment, this is liberation. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote about the importance of guarding your peace, not as selfishness, but as emotional sovereignty. After a lifetime of performing socially, of managing other people's emotions, of sacrificing your clarity for their comfort, you finally have permission to focus on what you can control, your own well-being. Sometimes the reason people love being alone is because the world once disappointed them. Sometimes the reason they protect their sanctuary is because they've learned that not everyone deserves access to their inner world, and protecting your peace isn't emotional weakness, it's emotional wisdom. Picture this: you're standing at your window, watching life continue outside. People rushing, cars honking, the world moving at a pace that once exhausted you. And you're here, in the quiet, in the sanctuary of your own home. Society glorifies busyness as if stillness is failure. But rest is part of growth. Stillness is part of clarity. And what you've discovered, what took years to understand, is the beauty of self-companionship. The ability to sit with yourself, in silence, and not feel the need to fill it with noise. That's not loneliness, that's freedom. But I'd be dishonest if I didn't talk about the part that never completely goes away. Because even when you know you made the right choice, even when your life has improved in ways you couldn't have imagined, there's a part that still hurts. It's the part that wanted different parents, not other parents, the same parents, just different. Parents who would ask how you are and really want to know the answer. Parents who would celebrate your achievements without turning them into competition. Parents who would say, "I love you," and you'd feel it was true. This grief is the grief of the family you deserved but never had, and it can last a lifetime. Not as an open wound, but as a scar. Something you carry, that's part of your story, but that no longer defines who you are. There's one last thing I need to tell you. If you're watching this video because you're considering walking away from your parents, or because you already have and still doubt your decision, you are not a monster. You are not ungrateful. You are not incapable of love. You are someone who had to make an impossible decision. A decision most people will never have to make. A decision that shouldn't have been necessary, but it was. And you made it because you needed to survive. Not just physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. You chose to protect yourself because no one else was protecting you. And that's not weakness. That's the deepest form of self-love. A love you may never have received, but that you learned to give yourself. You've earned this peace. After decades of trying to be enough for people who would never see you as enough, you finally chose yourself. And that choice, that quiet, painful, necessary choice, is the bravest thing you've ever done. If this resonates with you, if you want to go even deeper into understanding how to build a life that honors your peace instead of draining it, there's more waiting for you here. Another conversation, another layer, just for you. This is Alone Together, a quiet corner of the internet for people who choose peace over performance. If you're here, you're not broken, you're just built differently. And you're not alone in being alone. That box at the back of the closet still exists. The photographs are still there. The colored pencil drawing, the birthday card. And maybe one day it will be opened again. Maybe not. But the person who kept it is no longer the same. They learned that love isn't enough when love comes wrapped in pain. They learned that forgiving doesn't mean allowing. They learned that some bridges need to be burned not out of anger, but out of necessity. And they learned, finally, the most difficult of all lessons, that sometimes the most courageous way to honor who you are is to walk away from who raised you, not with hatred, not with revenge, but with a mature sadness that accepts some things cannot be fixed, and with the peace of knowing that choosing yourself is not betrayal. It's survival. It's healing. It's the first step of a journey you can finally take without carrying on your back the weight of those who never let you walk.